Realizing the seriousness of the battle to his north, Patton said,
"My guess is that our offensive to the Saar will be called off and we will have to go up there and save their hides."
Holding this remote stretch of the front were just 60,000 troops, mainly Americans.
The Ardennes were considered to be a quiet place, a place in which divisions that had been badly damaged, had taken many losses in earlier battles, could be put there for rest, recovery, replacement, the training of replacements. But also it was a place where newly arrived divisions from the United States could be placed in to have the sort of their first experience.
It was this ghost front that the Germans chose for a surprise attack. Before dawn on the morning of December 16th, Sergeant B.O. Wilkins of the U.S. 99th Division beheld an unearthly sight.
The entire sky was flooded with floodlights. It was light. On the mist and the fog and everything, it came directly across, and it was just like daylight practically with all of the light. Nothing was happening at the time, it was just lights. About that time, the artillery barrage started.
The Nazi artillery barrage lasted more than an hour. Behind it, waiting to attack, was a massive force of more than 250,000 German troops. Among them was assault gun commander Hans Baumann.
We were very apprehensive before the offensive began. But the moment we went into battle, all the fear went. You were free of it, because you were finally going into what you'd been preparing for.
The German objective was to break through this weakly held Allied line before crossing the River Meuse to capture the vital Allied supply port of Antwerp. The Allies found themselves in a desperate situation. The German offensive had taken them completely by surprise.
At the beginning of the Battle of the Bulge, Third Army was regrouping for an attack on the west wall in the Saar area. On December 18, Eisenhower called Patton, telling him to come to Verdun immediately. Eisenhower wanted to counterattack into the southern flank of what was becoming known as the Bulge. The situation in the north was deteriorating, and Bradley asked Patton to start moving the divisions into position as soon as possible. At dawn on December 19th, the 4th Armored started moving north and the 80th Infantry started moving toward Luxembourg City. The official after-action report states, on December 18th the 5th Division, which was fighting heavily in the bridgehead area of Frau-Lauten and Saar-Modern, yes, another bridgehead, received orders that they would be relieved by the 6th Cavalry Group. The 5th Division would move north, to the vicinity of Luxembourg.
On December 19th, Generals Eisenhower, Bradley, and Patton held an emergency meeting at Verdun. A battle plan was agreed upon. St. Vith and Bastogne must hold. The Germans must not be allowed to reach the Meuse. Even as the battle orders flowed forth, cracked German airborne units were dropping behind the Allied lines. English-speaking Nazi soldiers wearing U.S. Army uniforms infiltrated the rear, misdirecting traffic bound to the front. spreading false news of disasters. For days, they created panic and confusion.
The Third Army, which during a period of 6 days, broke off its general attack in the Saar region, turned left, moved more than 100 miles over unknown winter roads, and mounted an attack with 6 divisions. To make the point again, there is no more risk-laden battlefield maneuver than a 90-degree turn and movement across and perpendicular to one's own lines of communication. A close examination of what Patton's superbly trained staff was able to pull off, once the decision was made to pivot the Third Army, reveals a tour de force of military planning and movement. The logistical feats accomplished by the Third Army over the next few days would prove nothing short of phenomenal. I include the circuit diagram as one example of how much logistical support is required for such a difficult move. Even the circuit diagram shows the 5th Division furthest east of all the combatants, again, part of an armored division of the Third Army moving into the Ardennes. This dispatch from the front, printed in the local newspaper, states that a sleet storm covered the front with ice, turning roads into virtual skating rinks. The temperatures in the area at the time were in the teens and 20s. It snowed, and the winds were blowing. The troops had to be out in the freezing, wind-blown cold, every day, sleeping in their frozen clothes, in foxholes, day after day after day.
To the south, in the region of the Saar, General Patton, as ordered, had turned his army northward, toward the besieged Bastion. Ever impatient, Patton hoped to relieve the city in one dramatic sweep, but terrible weather all along the route made for slow going.
While Patton and Gump's 5th Division were riding to the rescue, so to speak, other sources I researched state the following examples of the situation. The commander of the 394th Infantry Division was said to be close to cracking up under the strain. He was described as a quivering hulk. Officers seemed unable to control their men. The German commander commented that the enemy was in total confusion. On the 20th of December, the 5th Infantry Division was hurried north to knife into the southern flank of the German Bulge. On December 20th, we were tired. We had disengaged the enemy in the middle of a fight at Saarlautern, moved 100 miles through 3 countries in just 22 hours, and were now about to go into battle without any sleep, hot food, or relief of any kind in sight. This was the 5th Division's introduction to the Battle of the Bulge. We infantry grunts had no knowledge of the Nazi push through the Ardennes at the time. We never knew the size of an operation, how many units might be involved, or the strategy behind it all. We simply went where we were told and fought for our objectives. Survivors learned the details long after the fact. In this instance, it didn't take a West Point graduate to figure out that something big was up. When you were with Patton, you didn't disengage the enemy at his own border, in Saarlautern, then travel 100 miles, to fight him somewhere else, without good reason. We knew that the Germans had made a big push somewhere and the situation was serious. The Germans were supposed to be beaten. Since they surprised our commanders with weapons and men that no one ever dreamed they could have, There were all kinds of nasty rumors flying around and we were all a little unnerved. We wondered what else might they be capable of doing. To make matters worse, we were in the midst of the coldest winter Europe had experienced for a century, and we were going to spend it fighting in the snow and frigid temperatures. Luxembourg was covered by snow a foot deep, and the temperatures were so low that I remember thinking that, even if I did get out of there alive, I would never again be truly warm. Meanwhile, the Germans were taking American prisoners, many of which were murdered in cold blood. Our troops knew of the atrocities committed by the enemy. It was, indeed, a matter of life or death, we or they. Several senior officers made it clear that they approved of revenge killing. In the rear areas, tens of thousands of American stragglers, service and support units, clogged roads and villages, fleeing in unashamed terror. Talking about his experience with prisoners, Gump said that often, when a buddy was told to take a prisoner or prisoners to the rear, as soon as they were out of sight, shots were heard. My buddy would quickly return, and explain, the prisoners had tried to escape, and had to be shot. Germans in the Ardennes offensive shot prisoners on a substantial scale, and even more contemptibly, murdered in cold blood more than 100 Belgian civilians. Some men still lacked proper winter clothing. Many formations were suffering alarming casualties from trench foot. As one GI stated, "We didn't sleep, so we took our shoes off, and took turns sticking our feet under the other guy's armpit." Gumps told me he would have to peel off his socks. During the Battle of the Bulge, more than 15,000 American soldiers were disabled by frostbitten feet or trench foot. The afflictions were quite similar: cold, accompanied by moisture in the case of trench foot, slowed circulation in the foot and filled the tissue. Sometimes gangrene set in and the foot had to be amputated. International news service is quoted in the local Syracuse paper. Once again it was Patton who claimed British headlines, with the Evening Standard's banner reading, "Patton chases them."